philosopher who had like a really good like his name was a Russian one. His name was like Charles something. I couldn't find it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I remember that. I just don't remember what he said. I never said it. And you asked him how to spell it. It was what?
I can't read my own handwriting, but I can just do that.
Have you been here since 4?
Sorry?
Did you come here at 4 this morning again?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Is it raining then?
No, actually it wasn't. I see the stars this morning. Yeah, but I'm the only one in the tower building, so sometimes, once in a while you have earthquakes. A couple of weeks ago there was one. And so every time I go there I say, well, if this building falls apart, no one knows I'm here. I don't know.
No, but if you've been doing it, sometimes sure somebody knows.
Yeah, the security people know.
That's about it.
Yeah. Isabel, how does it feel to be in this classroom every day? Yeah. Say again? Yeah.
Did you miss Monday coming here?
No, not at all.
I thought this one you get your me time. When you come at 4 and all that stuff, your me time. Oh,
Yeah, it's in the office, have some coffee, listen to some music.
oh, you still came? You still came in?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all that.
Yeah. So anything new with any of you before we go home?
Oh,
Leah?
My same question from yesterday, I think I had to go to chemistry class before it was finished. The answers. It was my question about Siddhartha and the prodigal son.
Okay.
I suppose, what is the difference in their journeys if they both arrived at like the same point of having wisdom? And why were their journeys different in the first place? Like, what makes Siddhartha and the prodigal son different?
So for those of you who may not know what Leah is talking about, there is a story in the Gospel of Luke called the prodigal son, or a son who just is wasteful, told to us supposedly by this figure, Jesus. And the other story is told to us by Hermann Hesse in his book Siddhartha, unless you're talking about the Buddha. But let's just limit that to Hermann Hesse's book. Can I just unpack the whole thing from the beginning? It bores me, but I will do it. So there is this father. He has 2 sons. Before we talk about the sons, let's just talk about the father. And the sons are no longer like teenagers. They're in their 20s or 30s or 40s. So if you're talking about an old man, someone in his 50s or 60s or 70s, One of the things that happens to all of us, I suppose, in life is when you're young, you're naive. Naivete gives birth to just being stupid, which means that we make the wrong decisions, do the wrong things, feel the wrong feelings, and have the wrong thoughts. But we assume otherwise. It's a free gift, ignorance, that comes with just being young. So when we speak about a father, you're talking about a man who was once young, made a lot of mistakes, time passes, he looks himself in the mirror, has some age on him now, has wrinkles, every line on his face has a story to tell. There's a good amount of wisdom, but that wisdom, I suppose, can't be shared or communicated. But he does his best to give his kids what he can. In his case, he saves his money. At a certain point, calls the kid and says, listen, I'm 70, 80, 90, I'll die, but just in case, you come to knock on the door, come to my room, and realize that Dad, I put aside about 100,000, 50,000 for son number one and 50,000 for son number two. That's how you split the money. Days go by, and one of the kids goes to the father and says, listen, I've been waiting for you to pass away, but that time hasn't come yet. So can I just have my money now, my share of inheritance? One of the things that kids are really good at is they're constant nagging. They're obsessed with a thing and they keep harassing you. For those of us who have kids, we know this well. They want to watch Sonic or they want to go to Target to buy some stupid toy. Every 10 seconds, when are we going? When are we going? When are we going? And you keep saying, just give it a couple days. It's okay. But then 10 seconds later, when are we going? When are we going? When are we going? There comes a point where the father comes to realize that no amount of reasoning, no amount of logic, no amount of punishment will do anything. And all the snagging eventually leads to agitation, irritation, frustration. And then you submit. You say, you know what? Here's the money. Knock yourself out. One of the unfortunate things that happens to us parents is that when you have children, who's that? Right?
Yeah.
They both come with different temperaments. One is an introvert, the other is an extrovert. One is a feeler, the other is a thinker. One listens, the other doesn't. As one of my friends in Chicago who is a professor, he's got two sons, he teaches sociology. One of his sons teaches psychology, the other is serving 20 years in prison somewhere. I have a daughter. She comes home from school. She unpacks her backpack and she starts studying. Doesn't need to be told anything. I have a son. Not even the wrath of God would set him straight. I'm not quite sure what to do with him. So that's the trouble that this father is having some 2,000 years ago. He's got one son who listens well and respects his father. You have the other son who's younger, but he just doesn't listen. Talk about the injustice of life. Leah, what is it that parents want from their kids? Just sit and do your goddamn homework, that's all. Wash the dishes. Clean your room. Don't smoke. Don't drink. Are these too much to ask? No, of course not. But there is something about the soul or the spirit of this young kid that's rebellious, always in a state of revolt. Now you would think that when the younger son comes to the father and says, give me my money, the father would sit and say, son, let me tell you how tough it was for me to save 100,000 grand. You don't think I have desires? You don't think I have things I want to do? That's one of the things about parents. When you're single, you don't worry about anyone. The moment, even when you get married, you don't really worry too much about your companion. But when you have kids, it's a very, very different story. For mothers, mothers worry about their children when they're like in the womb. But fathers, it takes them 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years to actually begin to care. So there is another injustice in life, that it takes fathers a long time, or maybe the kids a long time to become intimate with the fathers. You have to ask yourself, this is like a 70-year-old man. You should have a good amount of wisdom inside him. He should be able to sit his son down and say, the woman you chose to be your wife, she's the wrong person for you. You dropping out of school, that's the bad decision, You not going here or not going there, that's the wrong thing to do. The young son doesn't listen. And that's another thing you need to understand. You need to reach people at the right time for them to be able to have an open ear for something to sink. I have never seen a bee speak to a fly, saying to it, hello, there is some honey there. Why is it that you keep sitting on shit? The bee eventually just kind of flies away, And that's what old people do ultimately to young people. They know that young people enjoy shit. So if you have any wisdom about you, just walk away saying, hey, I can't knock any sense into this guy's skull. So that's another thing you need to understand. You can't share your experience with another. And even if you're able to, it won't be received. And even if someone pretends that they're listening, it won't really be understood. You know how many people are failing this class currently? I can stand here and keep telling people, you're no longer 18 or 19, 20, or an old man or an old woman, Do something to pass the class. I go home, I turn on the computer in hopes of scoring every person, Some people haven't turned in anything. Am I saying something bad and nasty? Of course not. It's your future, take care of it. But you realize that, some people are not just ready, so what do? Just give up. So, for those of you in this class who have any wisdom or insight or experience that has been processed inside you, and you've been wanting to give that wisdom to a friend, to a kid. If you have a father who drinks too much, a mother who drinks too much or does drugs, and you keep telling your parent, listen, I have a sister, it's your daughter, it's your son. They can't be seeing you like this all the time. And you realize that you as a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old are trying to share some insights with your parents. Supposed to be wiser than you, more insightful, more responsible. But you realize they're in a position in life where they can hear, but they don't have the ability to listen. And even if they were to listen to get the message, the truth is they can't really act on the things that they hear. So eventually it saddens you, you get depressed, you walk away and you say, you know, I'm 12, I'm supposed to be a kid. I'm not in a position to parent my sister, who's only 2, but you realize that, you know, it's your responsibility all of a sudden. So the point ultimately I'm trying to make is that wisdom, insight, they have no buyers. They're always naked and they're always alone. So put yourself in the father's shoes some 2,000 years ago. He's trying to tell his son the value of money, the value of time. The son just doesn't get it. The father, despite his love for his kid, eventually turns the other way. Doesn't care, can't care. He's tried too many times and failed repeatedly. If that's a little too difficult to grasp, think of it this way. You keep dating losers. Something about you says, stop dating losers. That's your Jesus Christ. That's the Father inside you. You should listen to it. You hear what it says, but being responsible towards that message, very, very tough. And eventually, you will try to silence this insightful voice that lives inside you. You happen to be addicted to drugs or alcohol or watch porn all the time, and something about you keeps telling you, stop doing this. And eventually the father gives up, and you will continue watching porn or doing drugs. So no one is exempt from this. That's the thing you need to understand about the first aspect of the story. Wisdom cannot be shared, and if it is, it won't be understood. It's always alone. Okay. So the father has 2 kids, one kid respectful, the other is not. Just because you respect your father, it doesn't really mean you understand who and what he is and what he has done for you. It just means that you were raised well, maybe temperamentally, you're wired the right way. And so, even though you may not enjoy this class, even though you may not like me, the idea of you just packing up and rushing out of the class is kind of embarrassing for you. Maybe you were taught differently, so you say, you know what, I'm just going to suck it up, stay here. Hopefully time will pass by very, very, very quickly. Okay. But it doesn't mean you understand what it means to be me. It doesn't mean that you understand what it means to be in the classroom, looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 people who are uninterested, who look at you, pretending that they're listening, when in fact they're just daydreaming about different things. The fact that ideas are tough to listen to sometimes, boring, not very animated. But nevertheless, you're dignified enough to sit there respectfully and just listen. Okay. There is this other kid who doesn't care about tradition. Who doesn't care about respect. He says, listen, you told me to wait till you die to get my money. I can't wait. Some kids are just impatient. Some kids are just tactile in the sense that they need to go through the experience themselves. So, the father gives up and hands over $50,000 to this kid. Now, the next thing that you need to consider is the following. What happens when you give power to someone who's not very educated, not very disciplined? Let me give you a couple of examples. Imagine there is someone in this room who is about 35, 40, 50, 60, 70. And you ask them why they're here. They say, well, you know, I went through life doing A, B, C, D, came to realize it's all a dead end. I'm here now. And what they're saying is this. When I was 18, I had the power to be youthful, and I was. Vigorous, and I was. I had a lot of power. And I had a lot of freedom to use my power in any way I wanted. I looked at my mom and my dad and I said, listen, you guys have no power over me. I'm dropping out of school, going to Yosemite, doing ABCD. The parents try to reason, falls on deaf ears. Eventually they give up. The kid goes away. Power in the hands of people who don't think, who don't reflect, who are not disciplined and educated, always becomes a waste. Always. Brad Pitt, good-looking guy, great actor. That's a lot of power. Can't keep a relationship. Okay? And that's the other thing you need to understand. Someone like Donald Trump, someone like Mussolini, someone like Hitler, someone like Jesus, they all have power. In the hands of the wrong person, power becomes corrupt. Okay. So this young kid goes away. And what is it that young people like? They like to have fun. The idea of sitting and doing math, not fun. Going to the library and doing chemistry, really not fun. And the nice thing about having power and the freedom to use that power is the following. You see a young, attractive man or a woman walking around the lake and you have money in your pocket. You have nothing to lose. You just go and say, hey, would you like to go and have some coffee or have dinner? You know. So young people with a lot of power are very tactile in the sense that they're guided by their five senses: eyes, nose, tongue, touch. What you hear, you gravitate towards where your senses take you. So our young friend in the prodigal son story, he has lots of sex. He smokes lots of weed, gets drunk, goes to pawn shops, watches a lot of TV, buys a lot of houses and cars. He becomes addicted to pleasure. And that pleasure continues as long as he has power. One night, out of boredom, he goes to International and 35th. You guys know where that is?
Yeah.
And there is this nice young woman walking around with a Bible in her hand, with a miniskirt. And the guy says, how much? $50. He puts in his hand in his pocket to give her some money, only to realize he's run out of cash. With the passage of time, money is gone, power is lost, hopes and dreams are gone. And he goes to Safeway to steal some food, to feel his belly, but there are too many cameras. So he walks out with nothing in his pocket. Kind of like today, the weather is cold and it's raining, it's freezing. Doesn't have shelter, so he goes into a stable of sorts, sleeps with the dogs and the cats and the cows. Now, this idea of losing power, it doesn't mean that you need to lose all of the money that you have in your pocket. It simply means that once in a while your eyes open. I don't know how it happens. And you begin to reflect. And upon reflection, you ask why. And that why kind of removes all the power that you thought you had. And you say, you know, I still have a lot of money in my pocket, but what am I doing with it? Why am I wasting it on stupid things? So remember, every time you ask why, and you ask it earnestly, you enter this intellectual, emotional poverty. Your desires go away, your purpose goes away, your meaning goes away, your identity goes away, and you feel cheap and hollow. Then something happens to our young friend in the story. Maybe I'm going to walk back home and tell my father he was right and I was wrong. A couple of things about home. Home can be physical, or it could be emotional. It could be spiritual. There is a French song, I won't give it to you in French. It's a beautiful song where it says that today I woke up with the feeling of going home. I just don't know where home is anymore. You know, imagine you left your parents at the age of 2 or 3, or perhaps they left you. And because you're young and you have a lot of power, just being young, you go around distracting yourself from the hollowness of life, from the misery and tragedies of life. And you distract yourself in a good way, healthy way, for 20, 30, 40 years. One morning you wake up and you say, I wish I had a mom, I wish I had a dad. Just to go, you guys seen the movie Ratatouille? Remember near the end of the movie where this food critic, you know, tells this guy, give me whatever, just surprise me. You know, and this dish comes for Ratatouille, and the moment this old man puts a couple of pieces in his mouth, he travels all the way back to when he was like 5, when he fell off of his bike, and he went home crying, and his mother gave him a hug and made for him ratatouille. You know, some of us, despite our most intense and earnest desire to want to go back home, the truth is, there is no God to go back to. There is no tradition to go back to. You know, that's one of the horrors of being, I suppose to some extent, an African American. You know, this country is about 200 and some years old. Language was taken, culture was taken, tradition was taken. Everything that makes a culture with good narratives to nourish its people, everything was stolen. And sometimes, imagine for a moment that if I was born in Iran, but my parents moved here when I was 2, I spoke broken Persian, didn't really understand the language, didn't understand the music, but once in a while I say, you know what, I want to be Persian, but I don't know the language, I can't read the language, I can't understand the language, I don't know the music, I don't know much about the culture. And then you realize, I'm not American, I'm not Persian, what am I? I want to belong to something. I want to go somewhere that feels like home, but there is no place to go. Okay. And I say this because the prodigal son in the New Testament, the Gospel of Luke, is what's fascinating about the story is the kid wakes up and says, I'm going to go back home. I think the tragedy for most of us in the 21st century is that there is no home to go to. You know, when you're dealing with 60% of the American population suffering from depression, there is no one to talk to. When you have this Norwegian painter by the name of Edvard Munch, most of his paintings are the same. The Scream, We are so technologically advanced. Dishwashers, Teslas, all these wonderful advancements in life. And then you have all these tears that you're shedding on the inside, and you go out and say, I want to share them with someone. And people see the pain on your face, as Munch was trying to tell us, but no one really cares. You're on this bridge, around the lake, thousands of people. No one pays you attention. And you realize you are truly what Jean-Jacques Rousseau had said, lonely in a crowd. Sit in a room, 30, 40 people. You want to raise your hand and say something, but the peers don't really care. They don't really listen. And even if they did, what can they do really? And eventually, all the songs that live inside you, you eventually choose to remain mute. You just die within. So just in case you read the story, before you jump to other parts of the story, ask yourself this question. The prodigal son had a father, had a great relationship with the father. Should he choose to go back to his father? He knows his way home. If you and I don't have a home, but we desire to go home, where exactly do you go? What exactly do you do? Okay? Now, why would someone desire to go home? You have money in your pocket. Why not sleep with some more people? Why not buy a few more houses? Why not travel some more? Because you're saturated. Because you've come to realize that nothing out there gives you pleasure anymore. That your ability to reflect has now blossomed. It matters very little where you go. The power of reflection is always following you like your shadow and forcing you to ask, why? 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 And then you become restless. I suppose in the story, once the kid comes to realize that he's wasted all of his riches, there's a good amount of regret. And that's the other thing, Leah. You're not going to look for home if you have no regret. And you're not going to have regret without the power to observe, to reflect, to ask difficult questions. And here's the thing about regret, Leah. It's not a thing you think about. It's a thing you feel about. And the feeling just crushes you. Regret. Now, for the first time, the son comes to realize something very, very interesting. It goes back to one of the sayings in one of the Gospels, that human beings are born in sin. Now, the word sin basically means missing the mark. The kid took the money, went away in hopes of finding happiness. Every door that he knocked and every door that opened and he walked through, in the end he found emptiness, hollowness, misery, tragedy. So, long story short, he walks home. His father sees him from far away. Now, you would think that a parent who knows that his money has gone to waste by a son who's an imbecile would be angry. Shut the door in his face, scream and yell at him. Nah, that's not what he does. And here's the thing about this particular fellow, this father. He just knows kids are stupid. And they have no choice but to do stupid things. So he turns the other cheek. The son is walking very, very slowly to his father. Seeing him, the father runs to the son. Now, the father forgives, but it's not an emotional forgiveness. In other words, it's not simply an inspired moment. Real forgiveness or mature forgiveness in this story is the following. Leah, you know, Leah, one of these days in about 5, 10, 15, 20 years time, you're going to find yourself in a classroom teaching a bunch of ridiculous students something. And someone is going to turn in an assignment, and you're going to filter the assignment. And then that system is going to give you a response, which is 99.9% AI generated. You can do two things. You could be an instructor, an administrator with little to zero understanding, just some stupid person who's climbed the ladder to the top. And you could look at the student and say, you know what, I'm just going to fail you. If you happen to be really anal, you'll expel them from the institution, which is, quite uncivilized. The other thing you can do is this. Before you issue a 0 and expel him from your class, you turn off your office lights, light a candle, put some piano in the background, close your eyes, and travel back in time to when you were 18. Say, I remember when all the essays I wrote for my BA degree, my bachelor's degree, all plagiarized. And I did so because the classes were uninteresting, the instructors were uninteresting, just the way ideas are presented uninteresting. I say, this student who plagiarized in my class just didn't find anything interesting. So you call this person to your office and you say, listen, Joe Schmo, this is not your essay. It wasn't written by you. I appreciate the effort of trying not to get caught, but the system caught you. So listen, what do you want to do? You want me to give you a 0? Or do you want to redo this? And the guy says, is it okay if I redo it? Say, yes. Now that's a good forgiveness, Leah. And you know why you're able to forgive in this way? It's not inspired. You understand what it means to be 18. You understand what happens when you find yourself in the presence of boredom. You understand the fears that live inside every person who desires a good future for themselves. How many fathers have that? How many adults remember when they were children and how stupid they were? Not very many. Okay? Now, to be able to forgive this way, you have to detach yourself from inspired emotions. And that's a very, very tough thing to do. Can I tell you a story? I had a Buddhist friend. He used to teach at Sacramento State. Hello, Abi. How are you? It's good to see you. But one day he comes home, he had forgotten his lunch, and he finds his, he was hearing some noise coming from the bedroom. First, he assumes the TV is on. He goes to the hallway, opens the door, and there is his wife doing it with some fellow. He looks at them both and says, I'm going to cancel my classes for the rest of the day. I'll be in the kitchen cooking some food. When you guys are done, come, let's sit and eat. You know how long it takes human beings to become good butchers, that they can kind of separate the emotion from the intellect, to be able to think soberly, reflectively? This guy was able to. This is so boring. I'm so bored. I think I need to retire. Anyway, so the father celebrates, butchers a few cows, steals some outfits from some store, gives it to his son, showers him, bathes him, cleans him, cuts his hair, shaves his beard. It makes no sense. A guy takes your time, takes your money, takes your life, wastes everything. And then he comes back home and you embrace him like that. I mean, just think about it for a moment. Leo, you have a father who's abusive, a mother who's a piece of shit. They destroy your innocence from the age of 2 onwards. You struggle your whole life to make a sense of this whole miserable life. And then after 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, your father knocks on the door and says, I'm so sorry. You went through like 50 years of rehab. You read books, therapists, medication, all sorts of things. And you eventually got your act together. And the culprit, this villain, knocks on your door and says, I am really, really sorry. And you know what you do? You don't slam the door shut in his face. You say, I understand. Come in, meet my family. Makes no sense. It is an indication of what happens when people act emotionally versus reflectively. These are two very, very different human beings. Yes.
I just wanted to ask you a question about the prodigal son.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, do you think everybody has to go through that discipline with money, other than just young people? They're like older people get money, they wasted their first gruesome time and they have to experience.
I think money is just symbolic for power. Some people have money that goes to waste. Some people have good looks that goes to waste. Some people are athletic, but they happen to be just lazy, so it never blossoms. Some people are geniuses. They have talents for all sorts of things. So whenever you have power, that power can be used in 2 ways. It could be used to create a life that you could look back and be, to some extent, proud. And the other camp is you use your money or use whatever power you have in life in a way that causes regret. That, you find yourself in a church saying, you know what, I was so stupid. And there's a good amount of luck involved with that. If I was to tell you like a personal story, I would say the following, that my brother was very disciplined, I wasn't. And it's something I always tell my parents, that had they not come to the States and bought a car wash, and were we not forced to work at the car wash, I would have probably ended up in prison somewhere. Because I just enjoyed like stealing things or being naughty of sorts. Now, initially when my parents came here, I thought it to be a huge imposition, that they're taking away my freedom. I wanted to be young and I wanted to be free. I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. But they held me hostage. Okay. Now, I have many friends who were not lucky enough to have their parents come here, and they ended up in a very bad place. And then I was very lucky. I didn't like to go to school. I hated school. And then I ran into a guy who eventually became my teacher for the next like 10, 15 years. You know, I went to his house 3, 4 times a week for 5, 10, 15, 20 hours each time. And he made me fall in love with ideas. You want to call it philosophy, you can, you know. And when I look back, I realize, you know, I had some key figures in my life. A lot of people, because Hussein was like the hub of our community for about 40 years. But no, Hussein was a guy I met here. And the point I'm trying to make ultimately really is this, that you either are lucky, and I don't know how that happens, where you have parents who support you, or you happen to not be that fortunate. Your parents are far too busy to put food on the table. So your talents and your geniuses are never discovered by your parents. And so they're never protected, they're never nourished, and they never blossom. So because you want to help your parents, you get a job at In-N-Out, you become manager at In-N-Out. By the time you figure things out, you're like 60-year-old man, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, man, you know, I could be a great musician. But because some key figures were missing in your life, you know, all you have is a regret. Okay.
When you say you were a hostage, were you just getting disciplined? They just kept you close?
Oh, but you don't think it that way.
As a kid, you probably don't.
Yeah, even now, if I was to look at you and say, you piece of shit, do your work, you would take offense to my comments. I mean, who am I to call you a piece of shit? I mean, you and I are equal. You know, you're a student, I'm an instructor, but I should have a good amount of respect for you. But you feel offended, and that's how all young people, or anyone who's giving advice or given advice, is going to feel. You have no right to tell me how to live my life or how to think or what I should or shouldn't do. I live my life the way I want to live my life. Fuck you, you know. And the time passes. You know, for some people, again, they're lucky. 2 weeks pass by. Some people, 20 years have to pass by. When you realize, well, you know, you took some wrong paths. You ended up in a wrong place. And now you want to go back and fix your life. You know, it's like you abuse your kids, or you abuse your wife, or you abuse your husband. And you've created such a crappy history with them. And all of a sudden you wake up and you say, you know what? I want to make things right. And that's great intentions to have. But the problem is, your wife has 20 years of abuse inside her. That's history. How are you going to delete that? That takes a lot of work on your part. And that's the price you pay, you know. So that's the thing about power. You know, again, in the hands of someone who doesn't know, it's always going to go to waste. Always.
Why do you think people search? Why do you think people want power? Is it something that they're not getting or they don't get at home? Because some people, when you give money, they might not think of power. They might maybe try to think of how to make more money or something.
Look.
I'm not trying to control nobody, but I do understand what you're talking about when you say power, when you have money. But why do you think everybody wants to be like that, wants to be on top and say, oh, I got all this money, so do this for me?
So listen, we've been having this conversation. Your hand goes up. You have things to say. That's a good amount of power to have. That you have the sense of curiosity. You have these questions that you want to ask. You don't raise your hand. You just ask it, you know. And you don't really care if your questions are good or not. All you know is that these things are bubbling inside you, and you just spit them out. What would it take for you to pause for a moment and say, before I ask my question, let me just mull it over. Let me just think it over. Let me see if I can figure this out on my own. Nobody does that. You know, you have power, you want to spend it. You know? I mean, you know this. When you have a lot of cash in your pocket, you just spend it. But when you don't have very much cash, and when the month's rent is due in a couple of days, you become very, very frugal. Because the rent reminds you of a few things, the value of money. You know, that, yeah, sure, you can go to Barney's and spend $50 on a burger with your companion, but maybe you could just stay home and eat better bread and cheese. That's like a penny, so you choose bread and cheese. So you pause. And the point is, some components need to come into play that force awareness about you. So despite you having power, you say, I'm not going to exercise it. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do.
It's something that you have to learn.
And you have to learn it from someone else, with a good amount of practice. And it takes about 20 years.
Or you can keep getting the money and messing it off and then be like, oh man, I'm not going to do it this time.
It's always better if you have a coach, because a teacher is always a shortcut. If you don't have a teacher, if you don't have someone who can guide you, you have to go the long journey, which is you spend $1 million, like Mike Tyson. I don't know if you guys have seen his interview. When he was younger and he was making a lot of money, he actually bought a tiger. And he fed this tiger like steak. And they asked him, well, how much did it cost? $60,000 a week. Are you kidding? So this is what happens when he goes bankrupt, and it's only now, in his 60s now, he has this great amount of insight and maturity and wisdom to him, where he's like a prophet to his own people and, young boxers. Yeah.
He wants to make fun.
Absolutely.
But you make stupid decisions sometimes when you get all that money. That's what I say. So.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Leah?
How can we prevent ourselves from being deceived by our own? What was the question?
Leah?
How can we prevent ourselves from being deceived by our own emotions?
Nisa, did you get that? You can't. Whatever it is that you experience around you. Hello, how are you? Well. Oh. I'm sorry, Alexis, I don't mean to laugh. It's just... Things are good? So, can I tell you a personal story? I'm sorry if I... Is that okay, Myrna? So, when I was sent to India at the age of 11, my father gave me a book to take to India and to read. 600 pages. It was a book, sayings of this wise sage in the Islamic tradition to his sons. So I've been doing philosophy for, 40, 50 years. I didn't get married because I loved. And I didn't have kids because I love kids. For the longest time, I felt as if I couldn't feel anything. I wasn't depressed. I was only in the business of standing far away, observing, taking notes in hopes of understanding a few things. And the thing about standing far away from life and looking at life from a distance and taking notes is that you can't allow your feelings and emotions to get in the way, because then your biases are going to come out, and that's not, a good way to understand anything. Okay, So if you want to understand, for example, why your father is the way he is, or why your mom is the way it is, or why your life is the way it is, the truth is, if you get your feelings involved in that particular task, you'll go the wrong way. You know, and that you have to become a scientist. In other words, it doesn't matter how much you love animals. If you want to understand how something works from inside, you have to kill it, lay it on the table, dissect it, okay? Pry open the chest and look what's inside. And all of a sudden, the animal lover that you've always been, you realize for the first time, you killed a dog. You opened the chest. You are bringing out the organs. You're putting them under a microscope to figure out who and what they are, okay? At the same time, you go back home and you take your dog for a walk, and you love your dog, okay? So you can be both a person of faith and a person of reason at the same time. You can love, you can also be indifferent, okay? And not hate, because that's emotion. Love with great amount of emotions, indifferent, okay? And so my teacher Hussein, and by this time he had become a family friend, came to realize that he had cancer, you know, and then one night my sister calls and says, or she texts, she says, Hussein died. I hadn't cried for like, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, you know. And all of a sudden I find myself in the bedroom, whimpering like a kid. Here's the thing. What was your question?
How did we put ourselves?
Oh, emotion, that's right. So, I knew Hussein for about 40 years. When you know something for those many years, you just don't have feelings about that. That history runs deep. It has deep roots. Feelings have roots, but you can yank them out relatively easily. Emotions, on the other hand, are a set of feelings that repeat themselves over and over and over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day. If you've seen the movie with Bill Murray, you know, the same stuff happens day after day after day after day. Let's say I like you, but you don't like me as much. But I also come to realize that you have this great talent for philosophy. You like to think. And let me just reduce philosophy to that. Your enjoyment to reflect. But I realize your life is busy. And for me, being as old as I am, and not having that much energy anymore and don't want my time to be wasted, I see legislation, this is hypothetical, genius inside you for philosophy. I say, okay, well, how do I get Leah not to simply be in class and have moments of feelings about reflection or thinking about an idea? How do I get her corrupt, contaminated with reflecting all the time? Okay, I have you come to the office. Now, you get a chance to feel the space. Then you come to class. Then I send you a text. And what I'm doing is I'm generating feelings, the same feelings, over and over and over again throughout the day. Okay? 2, 3, 4 months pass by, and all of a sudden you wake up and you say, you know, it's like I think about ideas all the time. Now, these feelings are not just coming and going. You have emotions. Emotions are a result of set of feelings repeating themselves over. If you don't like the word feeling, experience. The same experience repeats itself until they go inside you. And it matters very little how much you try to yank them out, they refuse to leave. Okay. Now, Alexis, she will deliver her child in a couple of weeks. The pregnancy will be over. Here's the thing about being pregnant or addicted to thinking, Leah. It's a pregnancy that only death will get rid of. You can't get rid of it. It lives inside you. You can't escape it. Okay? Now, when you talk about how do you overcome emotions, you're talking about first there is experience, then there is the memory that now lives inside you. And emotions, whether positive or negative, they're very addictive. Talk to any person who's been a victim of physical or sex abuse. It's a very, very tough thing to do. That they're in love with this person, and one of the languages of love eventually is you want your physical body to be next to another. But the memory comes back. What happened to you like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago? And you have to disembody, If any of us in this class have ever been to a therapist office, that is what you're looking for. Every time I want to get to point A, the emotions get in the way, and I find myself stuck, like frozen in space and time. And your therapist, if they happen to be any good, what they'll try to do is they try to kind of make you a bit more objective, remove yourself from yourself, stand outside, watch, observe, take notes, learn, hopefully understand, eventually, if this life allows, detach and move on. Okay.
I wasn't prepared when I showed you the classes. Light trigger.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Going back to Zamir's question, you can do this two ways. You can either try to do this on your own. In other words, you will listen to a lot of audios, read a lot of books, write a lot of journals, talk to a lot of friends, meditate, sit somewhere, in the middle of the ocean and think thoughts. That can take, and a good amount of it is luck. Maybe you'll have an aha moment, the veils will open, clarity will come to you as a blessing or a grace, and you'll understand, you'll walk away. Okay. None of us are that lucky. Okay. Those who try to do it alone, they usually eventually end up in the same place. You have to find someone who can guide you out of this maze. Now, here's the problem with finding someone who can take you out, hopefully. It's not enough for listening to someone who thinks well about this stuff. It's not enough. And it's not enough for someone to feel what they're talking about. That's not enough. There has to be this intuitive feeling with you and the person who's there to help you. Now, sometimes this union between you and your guide can be within a few minutes. That's very, very, very rare. The other is you're with someone for about 6 months, a good amount of conflict. Every time I go there, I get triggered. I hate that bastard. I hate the class. I hate everything about it. But there is something about it that says, yes, I know you hate. Go. And even though you want to stay in bed and not go, something about you drives you. So you go. And then the first thing that you say, I really didn't want to come to class today. But I'm here anyway, so fuck you. I'm here, And then 6 or 7 months pass by. And all of a sudden, the feeling that was negative created a good amount of irritation, frustration. It blossoms and morphs into something profoundly positive. Now, here's the thing about now you finding yourself in an intimate relationship with a person who you assume is going to bring you some light and remove darkness. We don't like codependency in teenage or adult years. It doesn't work for us. We are creatures who don't receive advice. We are creatures who want to explore. That's who and what we are. That's what the 5 senses are there for. I want to do this on my own. I want to burn, and I want to feel the sensation. Okay. The idea is someone telling you, go to school, don't drop out. But why not? What's waiting for me on the other side? I want to go on there and see it. Okay. You're going to kind of rebel against this particular submission. Right now, let's just say, you don't like being angry, let's just say. But the truth is, Anger gives you a lot of power. Anger shows you who you need to hate and why you need to hate them. Anger gives you purpose. Anger gives you identity. That's a good amount of meaning to have. You're rich, Leah, and not with money, with the emotion we call anger. And that's a huge judgment. Imagine I'm your father and you hate me. That hate that creates anger. I mean, you're like God, Thor, Zeus, sitting on your throne, looking at me saying, Amir is an evil man. Who does that? Only God is able to make such judgments. But no, you don't need God here. Leah can do this on your own. That's a good amount of power for you to have. When you have a guide, that person will not allow you to express your emotion. In this case, anger. Now, anger is an addictive emotion. You've been playing with it for the past 20 years. Now you have to pause it. How do you overcome this addiction? Well, you need to see your guide as someone, kind of like Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. Or Gilgamesh and Enkidu. And this person will think for you, feel for you, live for you. You live through this person, and you have to for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And for those of us in this class again who've been in like therapy for a while, one of the things that happens after like 5, 10, 15 years of therapy is that you realize that your therapists now live inside you. And by that I mean you now have the power to look, to see, to observe, to take notes, to understand, and to figure out what you need to do next. You don't need to go to any office anymore. Now the doors, the walls, the windows can speak to you. But that takes a long time. And for someone who's been hurt by life, it's a difficult place to be, giving yourself to another. And the problem also with doing things on your own is that you keep trying and you keep failing, you keep trying, you keep failing. You have no confidence left in you. Your world is dark and it's sad. And someone really needs to take a good liking to you, to just grab you by the hair, just pull you out. And they just won't care how loud and how often you scream. There was this show on TV, Little House on the Prairie. You guys, yeah. It's like it's the last couple of, I think, episodes of this show on TV before it was canceled. He has a son now. He's addicted to like drugs, cocaine, I think. And the doctor comes and says to him, the father, that listen, there is only one way. Tie his hands and tie his legs to the bed frame. Stand outside. You're going to hear a lot of screaming. He's going to cry out, Father, Father, but don't open the door. Do not be a father who thinks and feels emotionally. Be a father who thinks and feels intelligently. And so what you have is this kid's hands and feet are tied to the bed. And the father standing outside the door is shut. And this kid is screaming. And the father standing, he's weeping, doesn't open the door. And it's a half-hour show. Fast forward, the son is healed. I mean, in real life, it doesn't really work that simply, but you really do have to overcome a good amount of emotions to kind of heal yourself or heal another. Friendship is good. Books are good. I go back to what's his name? Woody Allen had mentioned. If you find any tools that have the power to kind of drag you out of yourself, pull you out of you, so you can be a bit more objective, where you're removed from your emotions and you become outside looking in. Stay in that space as long as you possibly can. Eventually, you need to understand your history is a living organism and it'll fight to survive. You don't need a Satan that's out there. The villain is right there. And they'll do what they can to deceive you. If that's how you want to phrase it, And it really is a Herculean task Watch an image of Atlas, Google it. I think every human being has a world inside them and they have to carry it. And their back is bent and their knees are broken. And that's how it is. The only point that you should remember is a tough task. It's not like IKEA. You can't just go to an Amazon and order it and it'll be here tomorrow. It's a 10, 20, 30-year period. Yeah.
I was gonna say that's true what you said about a therapist, because I seen one for like 7 years, and I remember the way I came to her. And after the 7 years of seeing her every week, when she started telling me that I inspired her, I knew I graduated.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm out of here, because like it turned into a point to where I didn't feel like it was useful, but it worked.
Yeah.
Like I said, I told her if she ever left this place, therapy would end for me, because I don't want to open up to nobody else. She felt like she knew me.
Yeah. Nisa, anything? What time is it before we... Yeah, Nisa, go ahead, before we go.
Just, I don't know, it sounded like you were gonna start talking about the sun and that.
Yeah.
I don't know, I was thinking about things that sort of.
Yeah, sometimes when I go to Los Angeles, or I want to go to Los Angeles, I look at the shops around me and I take an exit, and I just forget going to Los Angeles.
That's where you were going with it.
Los Angeles. Yeah.
It's a good story, though.
It's a great story.
Is that story out of the Bible? About
Yeah, Luke. Gospel of Luke, yeah. I don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
Yeah.
Do you know?
It's
What
15.
Oh, Luke
Yeah,
15? About the prodigal
15
son?
11.
Myrna, anything? Yeah, Ahmed.
I came in here briefly talking about the topic of anger. So I had a question. So I know, like, probably most of us have heard, like, someone tell somebody or tell you, like, yourself, that, oh, you have anger issues. Like, when you show your anger. So do you think that everyone, like, to some extent, has anger issues, or very certain people that get triggered very, or other people like get triggered?
Well, there are two different kinds of anger. One is personal, the other is impersonal. Let me give you the impersonal one because it's easier and we don't really have very much time. Donald Trump, a few years ago, paid only $750 in taxes. You look around, you look at people who work at Home Depot, in and out, any blue collar work. People don't make very much money. I mean, $200,000 these days, it's nothing if you have kids. And you have to pay mortgage and school and this and that, And you make 100,000 and you pay like 20, 30, 40,000 taxes. And this guy makes billions and he pays $750. I mean, single dollars, 750 of them. And the truth is, you sit back and you say, that makes me angry. And for some idiot like Eckhart Tolle to come on the stage and tell me, well, get rid of your anger. Well, that's a stupid thing to say. Being a human being down here without any pamphlets as to how we ought to live our lives so that we don't suffer from regret, remorse, you're justified in being angry all the time. Anger is not the issue. The issue is, how is anger expressed? You want to be angry at your father, you have every right to be angry. He wasn't in your life. Or your mother. I mean, they bring you down here from nowhere and they don't take care of you. You have every right to be angry. But if your anger becomes an obstacle to you having a healthy life, that's the wrong form of anger to have, or at least wrong way to express that anger. You should go to school, figure out what this anger is all about, what it means to be a parent, what it means to live in America in a capitalistic environment, in a fast-paced environment, sex, contraceptives, porn, boredom, relationship, just being a human being. When you understand that, that makes you angry. So you need to have a good amount of anger inside you because it'll encourage you, inspire you to write books, to raise your hand and ask questions, to ask for justice and fairness and harmonious ways to live life. All these like new age gurus coming on the stage telling us that we need to kind of silence our anger and it just lives in our mind and don't suffer frustration or this or that. That's just stupid. If you go home and your wife has told you to take out the trash 50 times and you haven't, you're a piece of shit. She has every right to be fucking pissed off at you. So grow up. Fuck. And then you turn the tables around looking at your wife saying, honey, I think you need therapy because you're angry all the time. Well, shit, you want her anger to go away? Take out the trash. So, that's a good note to end the class. Red, nice hair. Well, stay dry, have a nice day, take care of yourself.
Thank you.
And take out the garbage.
All right, take care, man.
You too, Zamir. Take care.